welcome to the Gamblin Gauchos. I'm Rob Bro. He's Money Mainville. And boy, do we have some things to talk about. You know what, Ryan? So we don't start off depressed. Let's start off with the basketball recruiting. You had a commit, I'm going to say out of nowhere. I'm sure it wasn't out of nowhere. It's someone I didn't expect to commit. But based on our last conversation where we left it as, you're probably going to start filling out the back end of this roster. You did get a high school commit, which surely everyone will be excited about, right? And Leon Horner, the third, you said?
The third.
Who is he, and how does he fit into that conversation of maybe filling out the back end of this roster?
Yeah, I think it's a good pickup for a couple of reasons. I think first and foremost, when looking at high school guys, because I think we're at a point now in college basketball recruiting that you really try to lay into the portal, and that's kind of priority number one. But if you're going to recruit high school, I think kind of what you try to do is look for next level readiness, like who on this pool can, come in and immediately contribute, who has the physical intangibles to do that. And I think that's where Horner kind of checks a lot of boxes. Listed at 6'6", good frame. Like he looks like a Big 12 basketball player. Obviously, that kind of first summer with a Big 12 strength and conditioning program does you a lot of good, and there's a lot of need for that in terms of a lot of incoming freshmen. But I think he's got some his offensive tape is really, really promising. Does a lot of things well offensively, whether that's playmaking, creating his own shot, getting to the rim. I really, really like his shooting from deep. And so I think that's an easy selling point from a high school guy, because you always need shooters. And so I think that's a huge pickup. But out of Frisco, played prep at Dynamic Prep this past year. That'll be a school that I'm sure we will hear time and time again over the next couple of years, because Texas Tech has a high priority target that was playing alongside Horner this past year. But obviously that year of prep school, gives you a little bit more of, I don't want to say college basketball feel, but it's definitely more structured than, playing grassroots or playing. But I really like his size. I think you've done a good job so far at loading up in the portal that I wouldn't want to project, what a minutes rotation looks like for a true freshman. But this is a guy who, Kellen Buffington tweets this all the time, but like, trust your work. This is one where you're kind of trusting your work, because this is not a guy who has a lot of high major offers. I think I saw among the likes of like Sam Houston State, I think he was just wrapping up a visit at Tarleton. So kind of these low major schools, but if you trust your work, you trust your relationships, you trust your scouting, then I think you're more than welcome to take a flyer on a guy like this who you see a lot of potential with. Maybe it doesn't necessarily immediately pan out year one, but if he's willing to stick around, he's willing to put in the work, I think there's a lot of reason for excitement in a guy like that.
Is this maybe a long-term teammate pull where you do start getting some guys from that area and you're just looking for reasons to go back with the high-value targets?
I think that's a staff's mind. It's like, hey, can we kind of leverage this for more? Obviously, you don't want to just chew up a roster spot and a scholarship spot for a coin flip. But the guy I'm referencing is Jaden Toombs. High priority for the staff in the class of 2025. Really, really, really good big man. But again, I think there's a lot to like with Horner's game. And so, if it was really trying to be a teammate pool, I think, maybe he's a PWO, but from what I've seen, it looks like he'll get a scholarship. I'm accounting for that on my chart right now until I hear otherwise. But certainly I think, that only helps, right? Like if this ends up giving you leverage on the trail later on, you certainly like your chances with that.
And then another visit this weekend. You're still looking at Great Osabor, but who else is in town, kind of highly publicized this weekend that could or could not be a commit in the coming days?
Yeah, I think Trazarian White, out of UNC Wilmington, played all three or the past 3 years there. Started off his career at Collin College with Jim Sagona, so another Metroplex guy with some ties there. That's a great basketball program, one that I'm familiar with. But Trazarian White, man, he's kind of got a bag, and you look at a guy who's averaged nearly 20 points per game last season. It's easy to see why you might be interested in a guy like that, but the offensive numbers are really, really good. 92nd percentile in catch and shoot situations last year. Really good at the rim, can create his own shot, does well in isolation, has some playmaking instincts, and then obviously the size, 6'6", 6'7", some places I've seen. Very, very comfortable creating his own shot. And I think that's a big selling point for this staff at this point, because you've got a lot of off ball guys. You just added Elijah Hawkins, who I think will help kind of, really bring some of those guys out, really help them reach their ceilings. You got Darion Williams, who I think will do well alongside a true playmaker, but can also go and get his own shot. But then you kind of add another option like White on the wing, and it gives you a lot of flexibility in your offense. I mean, we're talking about a lot of guys that can create shots for their teammates, a lot of guys who you can trust to put the ball down and go get a bucket. And so I think that this is a recruitment that has been interesting, to say the least, because he dropped a top 3 that did not include you. And then a couple of days later, there's an official visit taking place. And so whatever happened with that dynamic, I think it obviously ultimately worked out in Tech's favor, because I think he's a really good player. And I think if he is on this roster next season, I think it's going to do you a lot of good. And it kind of gives you a really exciting starting 5 to think about. Then you're looking at Elijah Hawkins, somebody at the 2, maybe Kevin Overton, Trazarian White at the 3, Darion Williams at the 4. And then if you're, feeling good about your chances with one of Great Osabor or JT Toppin, that's a very competitive starting 5. That's a starting 5 that can compete at the top of the Big 12. Stars just scored 2-1.
Got it up. They told me to get off the stream and start watching, but I am watching. Let's see. So you think that highly of Trazarian White that he could slot in as the 3 opening day. I don't know. I feel like Devin Cambridge, who started last year, is probably going to play the 4, but I just don't know here. But looking at Trazarian White for the first time here, he improved drastically every year he's at UNC Wilmington. 7 points per game, started a bunch of games there in his first role as a UNC Wilmington guy. Then he only started 20 games last year. He played in 30, but scored 20 points per game. So 7 points per game, 14 points per game, 20 points per game consecutively. Could we say this is kind of an Adonis Arms type guy who is a true role player and can come in and kind of provide any kind of or maybe a specific role, but kind of an adaptive role as a guy who comes in as a scorer?
Yeah, I think Arms had a little bit more pedigree on the defensive end, but I think offensively, that's kind of what you want to see whenever you recruit a guy at a level like this, is somebody who can do a little bit of everything. Because if they're just going out there running ISOs every possession, chucking shots, then it's kind of hard to imagine how that translates at a higher level, where they won't be the primary option, or they won't be the exclusive focus of the offense. But this is a guy who's really good off the ball, can put it down on the floor, really good in transition. If you just watch some of his highlights, he's got some really nasty windmill dunks that he puts down pretty often. It's like Terrence Shannon-esque. but maybe even a little bit more flashes of athleticism getting to the rim. It's pretty fun to watch. But I mean, I think the thing with him too is like watched a couple of his games. There's some against Arkansas and Kentucky, so those tapes are easy to find, but the shot selection is not great at times, and he was still like a 50-40 guy last year, like right on the edge of it. 49% from the field, 39% from deep. The free throws need a little bit of work. He's at 70%, but man, to shoot 14 shots per game and be just below 50% from the field that's really promising in terms of translating to a higher level.
All right, so you're still getting starter level guys. You're getting back end guys. What do you lack in this roster to finish it off?
I would say a big, and I think you really hope one of those is either Great Osabor or JT Toppin. And the thing with Toppin too is I think that recruitment's going to take a while because I think he has his eyes on the NBA. I don't know if he'll stay in. I don't know if he'll get um, the promised pick that he's looking for or whatever. But I think he is going through that process very legitimately. Great would be awesome, and I think he will be available probably more or quicker than Toppin will be. I think we'll kind of get an update on his recruitment, whatever it may be, following his visit to Washington. But I think a big man is probably priority number one. I think you feel good about giving Federico some spot minutes. I think even if you end up starting him next season, I think you'd be okay with it. But I mean, Osabor and Toppin are elite. They are elite big men. There's no debating that. And so I think you really want one of them. And then I would say a backup guard, especially a guy who can run the offense, give Hawkins a little bit of a break, so he's not having to be on the floor constantly. But other than that, like even if you land one of Toppin or Osabor and you land a backup point guard of some sort, that gives you two more spots to work with. And so I'm almost thinking they'll probably eat one. Um, I just can't imagine that they'll use, well, you have to, I guess, because you have a potential walk on or two um, with Jack Francis and Jazz Henderson. So I think you'll eat one, and then I guess you'll see what happens with the other.
I've got a question here. What happened to Jamal Mashburn Jr.?
I think he went to Temple.
Did he commit somewhere?
I believe he's at Temple.
Yes, signing with Temple in the same week. That was at the end of April. So from Minnesota to New Mexico to Temple. Is that true?
I think so.
And he was on the Kentucky, Louisville, Miami kind of radar. So interesting move to go to Temple. To me, it's interesting. Anyways, you go back to Toppin. The NBA process ends. I think the withdrawal date's the middle of June generally. So you could see Toppin go all the way to that date. You saw that with several guys over the years. Terrence Shannon Jr. kind of strung out his look at the NBA. Kevin McCullough did when he left Texas Tech. He committed to Kansas after that June date. Fardaws. A lot of people don't like talking about Fardaws, but Fardaws was one of those late guys that finally committed with the NBA.
He was never going to the draft, man.
I know, but that was one of the things that drew his recruitment out. So it's not unheard of. It's not unheard of to go through June, and really, I feel like this recruiting process has gone even faster than I thought it would. But you still have, potentially 3, 4, 5 more spots depending on what scholarships get levied out. I would assume 3 is probably the number of guys you're going after. And if that was a backup point guard and Toppin and Great, I would be ecstatic about what this roster looks like moving forward.
Yeah, and I think you will have to eat too. unless you put one of your guys on scholarship, because I think the max you can have on a roster is 15. I could be wrong, but I believe 15 total is the cap. And you've got 11 right now. Trying to do quick math.
Yeah.
9 scholarship players, 2 walk-ons. Yeah. So you're at 11 right now.
And the other walk-on, the other high school commit you got early in the process, before the season even ended. Yes? Still doing math?
It's Sunday night, man. My brain is...
Oh, man. I get it. All right. Let's get depressed a little bit. 2 weeks ago, we talked about Texas Tech baseball in high regard. You had swept 2 series, the latest one against West Virginia. You had gone to TCU in between and gotten beat in a series, but took a game from them. I thought the pitching had looked improved. But since that show, you've lost 6 Big 12 games, and that is just 2 Big 12 series. Been swept twice. You got swept at home in the Big 12 first time since 2007, it looks like. You were 25th in the RPI, I believe, on that day of the show. You also lost to New Mexico in that time. You beat UTRGV. That is your only win since we talked about potentially hosting. And I believe it was D1 baseball that put you as the 16 seed. And now you've fallen to 52nd in the RPI. In the Big 12, that's behind Texas at 51. West Virginia at 41, who dropped 5 more spots this week. That's behind Kansas State at 36, who also dropped 5 spots, but that's 3 Big 12 teams. Behind UCF at 31, who improved 2 spots and is probably not going to make the Big 12 tournament. TCU at 28. Oklahoma State at 24. And OU at 17. That is 6 teams in front of you. Then you go to the Big 12 standings. Oklahoma up to 18-6. Texas and Oklahoma State at 15-9, respectively. Texas losing today, but winning 2 against Oklahoma State in the previous 2 days. So they have tied up at 15-9. West Virginia also at 15-9, who lost their series this weekend. And then a little bit of a gap. Kansas and Cincinnati at 13-11 apiece. Kansas State 12-12. TCU 13-14. UCF 11-12. Texas Tech 12-15. Those are the top 10 teams in the Big 12. And coincidentally, Ryan, there are 10 teams going to the Big 12 tournament. Houston and BYU both with 6 wins apiece, 6-17, 6-18. Baylor at 9-15. So Baylor 3 games behind you, but they've got 6 games to play with Oklahoma and UCF on the schedule. And Texas Tech has 3 games to play with Oklahoma State on the schedule. So not only are you in danger of not making the postseason period, you're in danger of not making the Big 12 tournament, which is much, much worse than the conversation we were even having 4 weeks ago, which was, are you going to be a 2 or 3 seed? This has been an astronomical collapse. And on that show 2 weeks ago, I said we should cancel New Mexico and UTRGV. And Don Williams asked Tim Tadlock if he was going to cancel games. And Tim Tadlock said, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but quoting, he said, we just need to play good baseball and everything will take care of itself. Well, you've played terrible baseball. And things have not taken care of themselves. You've played bad defensively, you've pitched poorly, and you haven't hit in critical situations. And in some games, you hadn't hit at all. And that is a series against Kansas on the road where you get swept. And a series at home against Oklahoma, who, if you look at their season, Ryan, Oklahoma has either swept or gotten beat in a series. They've not won a series in which they haven't swept. So when you get to Sunday and they've won 2 already, you just kind of say, all right, well, the series is over. Now, you were competitive to the end today. You were the competitive to the end yesterday, but you could not come back on them yesterday, and you could not come back all the way today. Final 8-7 today. You scored a couple in the bottom of the ninth, but could not get that last run scratched across. And you had 4 errors from TJ Pompey this weekend, and he's 1 of 37. He's one of the leaders of the Big 12 in RBI, but he's on an absolute, just disgusting cold streak. Drew Woodcocks, who was one of the best hitters early in the year, has also not been good for the last couple of weekends. And it feels like his defense has been getting worse in the outfield. You have Damian Bravo, who has been a revelation at the plate this year, but is not a center fielder and has not played a good center field and really hasn't played as much over the last 2-3 weeks with some nagging injuries. Dylan Maxey gets hit in the face in the dugout. Owen Washburn gets hit in the dugout. You've kind of had to struggle through without those two. It's been pretty much everything that could go wrong can go wrong, and you just haven't been able to overcome. Today, Mac Hewer starts off poorly and starts, grimacing, looking at his oblique. It looked like to me. He leaves in the first inning. You kind of have to piece together with Utera and Sanders and the boys to get through this one. Just rough. And in the mailbag that we'll answer on Wednesday, patreon.com/Gamblin Gauchos, there's a lot of questions in there about the state of the program. Again, last week I said, let's wait till the end to talk about it. You're getting closer and closer to being able to talk about it in the middle of the season, which is not good. And you've won 9 straight in Stillwater. If you get swept in Stillwater and certain aspects of your team are still bad, I mean, you might have to Mac Brown the staff and just start fresh and just say, all right, Tim Tadlock, you're our guy. You'll be here forever, but we're getting new coordinators, whether you like it or not. Now, I don't think that'll happen, but I know that what's happening this season with this collapse is not good. And I don't think you can point at NIL or recruiting or development or coaching or pitching or hitting or defense and say that's the problem. But I think you can kind of do the YMCA point, and say all of those things have been a problem in the last 2 years. So what is the big issue? I'm still trying to figure that out, but there are big issues. And at 52 in the RPI and 10th in the Big 12, we're looking at a dangerous spot for Texas Tech baseball.
Do you know when the last time they didn't make the Big 12 tournament was? Is it recent?
Well, no, not since. No, it's been a long time. I'm trying to think. I think Tim Tadlock's been every year. And of course, you've had different levels of Big 12 engagement. For the last 10 or so years, it's been 8 teams in the Big 12. But in the Dan Spencer era, maybe you didn't make it once or twice. That'd be, back 2011-ish. It's probably the last time you didn't make it. I would assume Larry Hayes was always competitive enough that you were in the Big 12 tournament. the last time you didn't make the NCAA tournament, 2015, you were third in the conference, I think. It was just a weird time in the Big 12. So, yeah, it's you're starting to look at this and say this is the worst time you've had at Tech baseball in at least a decade, probably more, which is never a good thing to say. Like, when you get down to it, if you say this is the worst team you've had in 15 years, um, even if you've been really good, that's a really bad thing to say. So, uh, negative finish. A negative finish for sure. And you look at the rest of the Big 12, Oklahoma is kind of run away with it. And they're going to the SEC. Texas has been strong down the finish. They're going to the SEC. And then you look, across some of these new teams you're getting. Colorado, I don't believe, has baseball. Arizona is having a good season in the Pac-12. They're 17-7 in the Pac-12. I think they're leading the Pac-12. Maybe Oregon State is right there with them. Oregon State's higher in the RPI, but Arizona has the most wins in the Pac-12. Otherwise, Arizona State's way down there, who you're getting coming in. And then Utah is right where you are at 54th in the RPI with a better conference record, 15-9, but they're right there with you, 30-15. You're 30-20. Utah is surging a little bit at the end, ERPI wise. So maybe Utah and Arizona come in and make a splash, but it just doesn't seem like the Big 12 in baseball is going to be as good as it has been. Now, the SEC is so good in baseball. They have been. It's just in that conference with Texas and even Oklahoma now over the last 3 or 4 years is getting even better. I mean, that Big 12, SEC baseball conference is just insane. I think SEC baseball is what SEC football thinks they are. I mean, they're really good. Top to bottom, really. So, I don't know. I'm at a loss with Tech baseball right now. And I think we'll be able to discuss and talk through some things with Tech Hoops Guy on Sunday or on Wednesday with that Patreon episode. But right now, it doesn't look good. And if you don't beat Oklahoma State in the series, this is one of the biggest collapses, period, in college baseball that I can remember across any team.
I'm trying to find the last time Tech didn't make a Big 12 tournament. I can't tell if the finishes on the year-by-year records in the media guide are national ranking or conference ranking. I think it's got to be conference. There's no way Tech finished 6th in the country last year.
No, they finished 6th in the Big 12.
Yeah, so probably 2008, the last time you didn't make a Big 12 tournament, unless you didn't make it in 2012 in Spencer's last year because they were tied for 8th, it looks like. So it's been a minute either way.
Yeah. It's not good. I would assume it's that 2012 team. That's what shook the earth a little bit for the program. Certainly 2008 too. You finished 9-18. Kansas right there with you at 9-18. But a much worse overall. Whatever it is, it's bad. When you're talking about, let's go back to 2012 or 2008 to see when the last time you were this bad was. It's not good. And I mean, you potentially could finish 12-18 here with how good Oklahoma State has been. They just lost that series at Dish Falk, but coming back home, and again, they're probably pretty upset that you've won 9 straight in Stillwater. So it's not a great situation. You don't have a midweek, so you kind of have time to reset here. But sometimes in these situations, you want that midweek game. You certainly needed it against UTRGV, but that didn't get anything right because you still got swept against Oklahoma. All right. Any other news, tidbits, things around the world of sports you want to talk about today?
I'm realizing what I said about the scholarships made no sense. If you have 11 spots accounted for right now and you have 4 scholarships remaining, you can absolutely use all of your remaining scholarships unless you decide to award a scholarship to either Jackie Fran or Jazz Henderson. So maybe they will. Who knows?
Or
Portal's still very full.
you've seen college athletics, especially in college basketball, leave a scholarship open for a mid-year transfer.
Yep.
You did that twice here at Texas Tech, and you accepted Jalen Tyson and then Kyron Lindsey. Kyron Lindsey looking at Murray State.
Committed.
He committed today?
Yep.
So
all your guys who have hit the portal now have their landing spots with Lamar Washington to Pacific, following Dave Smart, Demarion Williams to High Point, Pop Isaacs to Creighton, Robert Jennings to Oklahoma State, and then Kyron Lindsey to Murray State.
So Robert Jennings and Pop, the only ones moving laterally. I think you could argue Creighton is a lateral program to Texas Tech, at least in the world of college basketball, where you have, the NCAA tournament and the teams that make the tournament. And I guess they call it the Power Six. Creighton's certainly a known team.
It's a good program.
Yeah. What's the what do you think the best fit is there? Do you have an opinion on that? Pop?
Probably because he's the most talent around him. I
Yeah.
mean, I think that's an easy argument to make. Interested to see what Lamar Washington does at Pacific. I'm rooting for him. I like him a lot, and so I hope he gets a lot of minutes and can show what he's about. I think it makes sense that he's with a guy he trusts in Dave Smart. So excited to see what he can do there. I would be lying if I said I know anything about Murray State or High Point, other than the fact that High Point finished higher in Kim Palm last year than Oklahoma State, and that's pretty funny to me. Steve Lutz, the new head coach at Oklahoma State, last year ran the fastest offense in college basketball in terms of average possessions per game. It's kind of interested to see what Robert Jennings will do in that system. Kind of always felt like he was at his best when the game slowed down a little bit, and he could kind of be a little bit more calculated and deliberate with what he was doing. But we'll see. It'll be interesting, too, to see if that system transfers over to Oklahoma State. I've not seen them do much in the portal unless I've missed it. But their best player last year is now at West Virginia and Javon Small. They're kind of building a sneaky good class in Morgantown, headlined by Tucker DeVries.
Man, you can recruit to Morgantown.
Yes, you can.
Especially in the transfer portal. You even go back to football. That's what Holgerson did in his final couple of years. And Neil Brown's been good at it too. In the secondary and the defensive side for sure.
TCU's added a couple of guards. nothing that excites me too much. They've got some good scores though, which kind of feels like what Jamie Dixon usually tries to do, is get guys who can make buckets. Trying to think around the rest of the Big 12. I think Cincinnati's doing all right. Yeah. Kansas State is having a rough weekend.
Are they?
Yeah. They
Hate to see that.
felt pretty good about believe it's Khalif Battle, the former Arkansas Razorback who committed to Gonzaga today. But I'm pretty sure they thought that was a lock, and he ended up doing a little 180.
Did I
It's
see
tough.
Michael be committed to Georgetown?
For whatever reason, yes, he did.
Okay. And then TCU had a guy commit and decommit.
Yes, the former UCF player
Okay.
who had the funniest decommitment graphic.
I didn't see it, I guess.
It's literally his picture. I think it's the same exact graphic that he used for his commitment picture. It's like a jersey swap of him. It's clearly like in practice too, which makes it kind of funnier.
Yeah.
But then literally just like Instagram red letter text decommitted on top of the graphic.
Oh my gosh. Did that himself. Let's see. The Stars up 2-1 with 2 minutes remaining. Vegas advancing. Wild shot from mid-court there. Mid-ice. BHW Law Firm. We proudly have them on our podcast. We are greatly appreciative of them. And you will be too if you ever get into any trouble. Criminal defense, personal injury, family law attorneys. They're based out of Fort Worth, but do great work across the state of Texas. Title IX, anything you need, they can help you out, or at least find somebody who can. You can contact them at bhwlawfirm.com. They don't want you to contact them, but if they need to be contacted, that's where you get them, bhwlawfirm.com. Again, criminal defense, personal injury, catastrophic injury, family law, Title IX, they can represent you. Okay. Trying to think if there's anything else. I'm kind of just stalling for the rest of the Stars game since we've gone ahead while we were recording. And this would be the shortest episode in the history of the Gamblin Gauchos at 38 minutes. Maybe we just set a record and end it here. Jonathan Garibay made a clutch field goal today from 48 with less than a minute left. But the UFL is crazy, and they still lost. Arlington is not very good.
He made a field goal the other day towards the end of the game too, right?
Yes, he's been pretty good. He was really good at Texas Tech his senior year. He went 13 and 14, 12 and 13. Missed his very last kick at Texas Tech in the regular season against Baylor in the rain, and it was like a wild 53-yarder maybe in the rain to tie that game when Baylor went to play in the Big 12 championship. But he was perfect otherwise. You got an empty net situation in Vegas. Obviously had the 62-yarder against Iowa State. Here's the decommitment. Yeah. That's like the old wasted meme where like the guy dies, it's like wasted.
GTA, yeah.
Oh man. Sure didn't have Oklahoma ending our baseball season on my bingo card, but man, that just straight sucks. Yeah. I didn't either. Why is UT getting love for their class, but all their best players left? That's an interesting thing. If you look at the transfer portal rankings, class-wise, Texas Tech, I don't think has been listed in the top 20 by anyone. Obviously, if you get Great Osabor, I think that probably bumps you up into the top 20. But I've really liked our class, and admittedly, I'm not like way into the portal for everyone else, but it feels like you've gotten a pretty good class, and you're not getting much love for it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think a lot of this probably comes down to rankings, rather than fit, which I guess makes sense because it's impossible for national media to really have a good pulse on every single program. But I think you've done a really, really good job at getting guys who fit well together, who you have connections to, who you feel confident in contributing at the Big 12 level. And so I think fit wise, you've done a good job without landing, the likes of, say, like Jeremy Roach, who's at Baylor now, or Tucker DeVries, who was obviously going to follow his dad, or AJ Storr, who went to Kansas. Like, you don't really have a big blue chip guy like that right now. That would obviously change if you get a guy like Osabor or even Toppin, I would say. But yeah, it's interesting. Like, I think arguably the best ad that Texas has had is Tremont Mark. But even Texas is going so guard heavy in the portal. It'll kind of be interesting to see what their team looks like next year, even though you don't play them. Well, maybe you will in Brooklyn. I still don't know how that tournament works, but you'll see them in Brooklyn if you're going.
Yeah, you'll at least see them from across the way. Kansas has 2 or 3 of the top 20, according to CBS, committed in. They've also got Brandon Garrison from Oklahoma State, went to Kentucky as a top 25 prospect. Interesting. Otherwise, yeah, I'm kind of rolling down these top 80 players. Milos Uzan commits to Houston from Oklahoma. Top 30 player according to CBS. I don't know if I would have said that out of the Big 12. And the Stars are moving on. Game 7. Wow.
Never a doubt.
Never a doubt. Still scrolling. Great Osabor listed at 43rd.
That's absurd.
Doug McDaniel, 47th. He's at Kansas State now. Tyrese Hunter, 49th. He's at Memphis. JT Toppin, 51st. Jordan Pope, now at Texas from Oregon State. Still scrolling. Let's see. Ole Miss with a couple of back-to-back top 60 guys. Still going. Nobody from Texas Tech yet in the top 80, according to CBS. Javon Small from Oklahoma State. How are 2 Oklahoma State players in the top 70 transfers, but they were the worst team in the Big 12? Explain that.
24/7 has Elijah Hawkins as 71st overall.
Pop Isaac's 80th.
Yeah, 24/7 had him like in the 90s.
Okay. Well, that's why you aren't ranked, because the national recruiting services just don't have them up high.
Yeah, Kevin Overton, 143 on 24/7. Federico, 339.
Yeah. According to On 3, Kevin Overton, 123. Elijah Hawkins, 97th. Federico, 512. Which seems like a wild number. 512 seems crazy. All right, we've done our part. The Stars are victorious. They'll move on to the next round of the playoffs. And we'll be back on Wednesday to talk a lot of Texas Tech baseball, to maybe have more information on Trizarian White or Great Osabor, and probably something else exciting with Tech Hoops Guy, as always on Wednesdays. They're on the Patreon-only episode, patreon.com/Gamblin Gauchos.
Love y'all.